everybody. It is time to bring back one of my favorite off-season series, my Reacting To series, where I look at your mock trade offers for certain players talked about in the rumor mill on the trade market, and just kind of react to and talk about what I think about the deal that you guys proposed. So today we're going to be doing Vladimir Tarasenko of the St. Louis Blues. Obviously, he has requested a trade out of St. Louis. It's been a very complicated situation with the injuries, his contract, and his wanting to get out of St. Louis and go into a new situation with a fresh start somewhere else. There's a lot that goes into this, so I had you guys drop your mock trade proposals for Vlad Tarasenko on the community tab a couple of days ago, and now I will be going through some of them, and we'll take a look and kind of talk about what you guys have. So before we get into it, I just ask that you please subscribe and hit that thumbs up if you haven't. It helps the channel an absolute ton and is greatly appreciated. But let's get started with our first trade offer. So this one comes from Shane, and this is a very interesting one between the St. Louis Blues and the Montreal Canadiens. And Shane has Jonathan Drouin and a 4th-round pick going back to St. Louis in exchange for Vladimir Tarasenko going to Montreal. Now, right off the bat, Tarasenko does have a no-trade clause in his contract, which means that he could veto any trade. So I don't know if Tarasenko would be willing to go to Montreal or not, but if he were willing to waive that no-trade clause for the Canadiens, this could be a very weird, interesting deal, though, because you kind of have question mark and question mark on each side. So Tarasenko, obviously 30-goal potential, very good scorer. However, has only played 34 regular season games over the past 2 years because of injuries. His shoulder has been a big issue. He's had 3 surgeries. He's only scored 7 goals. We've seen a big decline in production and availability for Tarasenko, making him a huge risk for any team that trades for him. Also, he carries a $7.5 million cap hit for the next 2 seasons. However, Jonathan Drouin is quite a question mark as well. He actually left the Montreal Canadiens during this season, did not play in the playoffs, and we really don't know what's going on there. It just said that he left for personal reasons, and he hasn't played. So Drouin is almost as big of a question mark as Tarasenko is at this point, for very different reasons, but there's still kind of a question mark for question mark kind of deal here. Drouin never lived up to his draft position as being a top 5 draft pick, but he's still a pretty solid winger in the NHL and certainly can play in the middle 6 on pretty much any team in the league. He's got 2 years left at $5.5 million, and obviously the 4th-round pick involved there too. This would be interesting. I mean, a healthy Vladimir Tarasenko is better than Jonathan Drouin, but the question is, are you getting a healthy Vladimir Tarasenko? Given his recent injury history, that is a huge question. This does, though, kind of seem like a deal that Marc Bergevin would not shy away from. I wouldn't put there's not much I would put past Bergevin to try, and this is something I think that he would at least pick up the phone and listen on. I don't know if it's something that realistically is likely to happen. I don't even know if Tarasenko would waive his no-trade clause to go to Montreal, but from a value standpoint, I think this could be a really interesting trade where you kind of have 2 guys who are probably looking for a change of scenery and are big-time question marks right now, swapping. It would actually free up some cap space for the St. Louis Blues. And for Montreal, just because it's Marc Bergevin as their GM, I just wouldn't, I don't know, I wouldn't put it past him, but I don't think this is something that's likely to happen. But a very interesting proposal from Shane here. Next trade comes from Alex, who drops one between the St. Louis Blues and the Washington Capitals. I've heard a lot of lot of people mentioning Tarasenko ending up with the Capitals, and that could be a really interesting combination there. But has Tarasenko and Sammy Blais going to Washington in exchange for Evgeny Kuznetsov, Michael Kempny, Nick Dowd, and a 2023 third-round pick. So this is obviously a very involved package deal, very complicated trade. So let's try and break it down at least a little bit. Obviously, you've got Tarasenko, who is a huge question mark with his health, but could be a very good goal scorer. Going to Washington here, along with Sammy Blais, who could be an interesting depth piece, to say the least. And then going back to St. Louis, you have Evgeny Kuznetsov, who has really dropped off with the Capitals and still has 4 years left on his contract at $7.8 million. I think that could be a big problem, that cap hit for Kuznetsov. Michael Kempny, who's a depth defenseman who has 1 year left at $2.5 million. And then Nick Dowd, who has 1 year left at $750K, coming off a very effective season with the Washington Capitals on their fourth line. Dowd would absolutely be an upgrade to the bottom six of the St. Louis Blues and a third-round pick. So this is really, really interesting. So obviously this trade is valuing Tarasenko more than Kuznetsov. I think it's valuing Blais as about Kempny and Dowd. And then the third-round pick kind of makes up for the Tarasenko being valued more than Kuznetsov. This is an interesting deal. I don't see it happening. I think there's probably too much money involved here, but I guess you could never say never. Also, I don't know about the fit with Kuznetsov in St. Louis because they don't really need a center. Because they have O'Reilly and Schenn as their 1-2. However, if they move Schenn to left wing, which he can play on the wing, then Kuznetsov becomes the number 2 center and you have Schenn play the wing. That could be a possibility. I don't think St. Louis is going to like the $7.8 million cap hit on Kuznetsov, but if you started to get some retained salary involved, that might make it a little more believable or realistic. Kempny and Dowd could be decent depth pieces, particularly Nick Dowd for the Blues. Third-round pick in there. I don't know. This is an interesting one. I don't think it's going to happen, but it certainly would be a really, really interesting trade if it did. And also, Johnny posted in the comments. I didn't give an own slide for this one, but Johnny posted just a Tarasenko for Kuznetsov 1-for-1 deal, in that the money would almost be a wash, only a $300K difference. Again, I don't know about the fit with Kuznetsov in St. Louis, but he's definitely a guy that Washington is looking to move. Tarasenko obviously wants out of St. Louis. That could be a really interesting possibility. I don't think it's going to happen, but it would certainly be a big trade if it did. Let's move on now to the next one. We have this one from Jack, and this is a really good one because the Islanders are a team that Tarasenko will reportedly waive his no-trade clause for, that we know. So this is a very realistic possible destination for Vladimir Tarasenko. Jack has Jordan Eberle, 3 years at $5.5 million with 10% retained salary, so that's right about $500K, going to St. Louis in exchange for Tarasenko with 50% retained salary, so that would make his cap hit $3.75 million, a 2021 fifth-round pick, and a 2022 third-round pick to the New York Islanders. So this is really interesting in a lot of ways. So St. Louis here is getting a good goal scorer in Jordan Eberle, a really solid top six winger who has 3 years left on his deal. And they would actually cut salary with this. Well, no, actually they wouldn't. When you take in the retained money from Tarasenko, I guess not, because you'd have to add the 3.75. So now you're looking at almost $9 million combined, but they would get certainly the better player, or the more consistent player with Jordan Eberle, the player that you know is going to produce. Whereas the Islanders would get the bigger question mark in Vladimir Tarasenko. However, they would only take on a $3.75 million cap hit with 50% of the salary retained, which would really open up some space that the Islanders desperately need, because they have Ilya Sorokin, they have Anthony Beauvillier, they have Adam Pelech. They've got some RFAs that are going to be getting raises this offseason. The Islanders need as much cap space as they can possibly get. If I'm New York, I would probably do this deal. And honestly, if I'm the Blues, I probably would too. Because Tarasenko doesn't want to play for you. You know that you're going to get consistent production out of Eberle, whereas Tarasenko's been a complete question mark for the last couple years. I like this deal a lot, and I would strongly consider this if I was both GMs. Somebody is going to have to go from the Islanders' perspective anyway. And Eberle is one of those guys that could potentially, will probably be on the block. It's probably either him or Bailey. One of those guys is likely not going to be back because of the cap situation. And they have Beauvillier, who can kind of take over that spot. Then you get Tarasenko on only a 50% of what he's making deal. And if he's healthy, I mean, you're getting a good scorer in there with a healthy Tarasenko, who could potentially produce at the same level as Eberle. And if it doesn't work out, if the injuries continue, you at least opened up some cap space, and you've got some other guys that you could possibly fill in there, like a young Oliver Wahlstrom, or you could bring back, maybe Palmieri in free agency. There are other options for the Islanders there. I like this deal a lot. This is the most realistic, in my opinion, so far. And this is one that I would strongly consider if I was either of these teams, because the Islanders need the cap space. They would get a couple draft picks out of it and a potentially good scorer in Vladimir Tarasenko. And then for the Blues, they get Tarasenko and his cap hit out of there. They bring in Jordan Eberle, who's a much more consistent player and someone who's been healthy over the past few years. And you're going to get production out of, and he should help the Blues top six. So I like this deal a lot. So thank you, Jack, for this one especially. This is a really, really intriguing one. Next trade on the list comes from T. Wade, and T. Wade has a pretty big package deal here, sending Nate Schmidt, Jake Virtanen, and Cole Lind to the St. Louis Blues in exchange for Vlad Tarasenko and Robert Bortuzzo. All right, let's break this down a little bit here. So obviously we know what a question mark Tarasenko is. We know that his cap hit is really big. Bortuzzo, depth defenseman with 1 year left on his deal at a little over $1 million. This would be a risky trade as far as what they're bringing in for the Vancouver Canucks. And I don't know if the Canucks they don't really have the cap flexibility with the RFAs that they have to be taking on Tarasenko's $7.5 million. However, from a player standpoint, Nate Schmidt had a brutal year with Vancouver this past season, so I would not be surprised if he wants out or Vancouver wants to move him. He's making $5.95 million for the next 4 years. Jake Virtanen, well, he's got himself in some trouble. He wasn't even around to finish the year with Vancouver. Obviously, he's got quite the situation going on there where he may not even play in the NHL again. And then Cole Lind is an RFA. He's a forward, 22 years old, who hasn't really broke into the NHL full-time yet. Didn't really develop the way that Vancouver was hoping, but still does have some potential. He puts up good numbers in the AHL, and a change of scenery might be good for a guy like Cole Lind. That could be a sneaky get for the Blues. And then Schmidt, I definitely think would help their back end. I think he needs a change of scenery out of Vancouver. I think St. Louis is a better situation defensively than Vancouver is. So Schmidt might be able to bounce back if he did end up with the Blues. That would definitely improve their back end. That would be a get there for St. Louis. Again, Virtanen may not even play. We don't know how that whole situation is going to turn out. If he's been a complete disaster for Vancouver. He only has 1 year left on his deal as well. That's if he even plays. But Lind and Schmidt could be good pickups for St. Louis. And then obviously the big question mark is Tarasenko going to Vancouver. This is a really interesting one from T. Wade. I don't think it's likely to happen, and obviously there's a lot of money involved here. But actually, when you look at it, if you combined Schmidt and Virtanen's cap hits, you're over $8 million. And then you add in, Tarasenko, and the cap ends up actually almost being a wash. And actually, Vancouver might even save, because if they don't, with Cole Lind, depending on what he gets as an RFA. So the cap wouldn't be that big of an issue, I guess, for the Canucks. The biggest issue for the Canucks would be, is Tarasenko healthy? I guess that would be the thing with Vancouver is Tarasenko healthy? Is he going to be able to produce? Or is this another Louis Eriksson situation, which the Canucks cannot afford? But overall, this would be a really, really interesting one. I don't think it's likely to happen, but this could be a really big kind of package deal if it did. And again, we don't even know if Tarasenko would accept a trade to Vancouver. He does have the no trade clause, but it's still fun to look at. And then one last one to go here comes from Mason, who has Kevin Fiala, who is an RFA this offseason, needs a new contract, to the St. Louis Blues, and Vlad Tarasenko to the Minnesota Wild. I am not doing this if I'm the Minnesota Wild. No, thank you. I just don't see how this makes any sense for Minnesota. Tarasenko is the bigger question mark as far as a player is concerned, and is carrying a huge cap hit, whereas Fiala, yes, he wants a raise this offseason. Kevin Fiala is a better player right now than Vladimir Tarasenko is, just because Fiala's been playing and producing where Tarasenko hasn't been. He's not going to get $7.5 million. You're going to get Fiala for less than what you would get Tarasenko, and Fiala's the better player right now. Like, if you took money completely out of it and said, you can have Kevin Fiala on your team or you can have Vlad Tarasenko, I'm picking Kevin Fiala all day long. This guy's had 20-goal seasons each of the past 2 years. They've been shortened years. He's still gotten to 20, and he's been on the ice. He's been playing. Like, he's healthy. He's a great young player, still just 24 years old. Whereas Tarasenko is in his late 20s, has had a ton of injury problems, has a huge cap hit. This, to me, just makes absolutely no sense for the Minnesota Wild. If Bill Guerin were to accept this trade, he should be fired on the spot. Like, this one, to me, is just not really realistic. Minnesota would never do this. Fiala is the better player and costs less, whereas Tarasenko is the bigger question mark and carries a huge cap hit. It's just not even close to worth it if you're the Minnesota Wild to do this. Obviously, if you're St. Louis, you literally don't even give them a chance to change their mind. You accept this on the spot. But this deal, to me, is not very realistic, in my opinion. There's no value here whatsoever for the Minnesota Wild. It would make no sense for them to do this. You don't want to take more money, a bigger cap hit on for the worst player. They're just better off paying Kevin Fiala what he wants, because Fiala's the better player at this point. So there you have it, everybody. Thank you to everyone who replied in the comments on the community tab post about this and put their mock trades in. Obviously, I didn't get to do all of them because the video would end up being way too long, but I want to pick like 4 or 5 per video as we do this throughout the offseason. I'm going to be doing this for more players, so be on the lookout. If you want to be have your trade possibly featured in one of these videos, make sure you're on the lookout for those community tab posts where I post a player that I'll be doing one of these videos for, and then you guys can throw your mock trades in the comments. But thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. I love doing these, and I hope that you guys enjoy watching them, and we can do more of this as the off season goes along. But with that, like, comment, share, subscribe, follow on social media. All those links are down in the description. If you'd like to further support the channel, the links to our Patreon merchandise store, donation link, and channel memberships are down in the description as well. Keep spreading the word about this channel. Let's keep this thing growing. Thank you very much for watching. Hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll talk to you guys soon.